The fire started just after 2 a.m., when the city was at its most fragile, that hour when even the wind seems to hesitate. Unsure whether to whisper or scream. In the heart of El Paso, a mansion burned like an open wound. Flames clawed through the windows, licking at the night sky, turning the smoke into a black halo. The air was thick with ash and vengeance, and in the middle of it all stood Adrian Vega, the man the newspapers called El León del Norte, the Lion of the North. His white shirt was streaked with soot, his jaw set hard, eyes reflecting the inferno he had created. Behind him, his men watched in silence. No orders, no noise. Just the steady crackle of fire devouring a history. He didn't turn when one of them spoke. "Hey, Faye, we found the bodies." 3 of them. Adrian's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Only 3? The others must have escaped." Adrian nodded once. "Then they'll bring the rest of the storm to me." The lieutenant hesitated. "What do we do with what's left?" Adrian's eyes didn't leave the flames. "Let it burn." He lit a cigarette, the orange glow flickering against his scarred knuckles. For a moment the night was quiet until a sound broke through the fire's song. Woman's scream, faint. Inside. Adrian froze. The men looked at each other, uneasy. "You want us to check, Hefe?" He dropped the cigarette. No, he was already moving. Inside, the heat was unbearable. The smoke clawed at his lungs, stinging his eyes, but he moved through it like a man chasing a ghost. The grand staircase groaned under his weight. Paintings melted into colorless ruin, and then he saw her, a woman on the floor, pinned beneath a fallen beam. Her hands were raw from trying to free herself. The firelight danced across her face, sharp, terrified. "Beautiful in the way pain often is. Don't move," he said. His voice steady even as his throat burned. She looked up, coughing hard. "Who are you?" He knelt, bracing his shoulder against the beam. "The man who started this." Her eyes widened. "Then why?" he heaved, pushing until the wood shifted enough for her to crawl free. "Because I didn't come here for you." She coughed again, trying to stand. "You killed them." "Yes. Why?" He glanced at her, expression unreadable. "For every tear she shed. She, my wife." The beam cracked behind them. He grabbed her wrist. "Move." She stumbled as he pulled her through the hallway, the floor splintering under their feet. The heat roared, walls collapsing one by one. By the time they reached the front door, her hair smelled of smoke and her dress was streaked with soot. Outside, the night hit them like ice. She fell to her knees, gasping. Adrian turned to watch the mansion crumble behind them, eyes cold and alive with something darker than anger. The lieutenant ran up, panic breaking through his discipline. "You went back inside? Are you insane?" Adrian ignored him. "Who is she?" The woman coughed, lifting her chin. "Camila Serrano. My father owns this property." Adrian's voice didn't waver. "Your father won't anymore." She flinched. "You killed him." He met her gaze. "I avenged her." "The woman you said." "Your wife?" He nodded once. "They took her from me. They made her beg. They filmed it. And when they sent me the video, she wasn't breathing." Camila stared at him, horror and pity tangled in her eyes. "So you burned everything?" He exhaled slowly. "No, not everything." An hour later, they were miles outside the city, an abandoned vineyard at the edge of the desert. The moon was pale, the stars distant and cold. Adrian's men had driven ahead, leaving only silence and the smell of charred smoke behind. Camila sat in the passenger seat of his black car, wrapped in a blanket, trembling but unbroken. She kept her eyes on the horizon. "Why did you save me?" He leaned against the hood, lighting another cigarette. The ember flared between his fingers. "Because you screamed like she did." She turned sharply. "You think that's mercy?" He looked at her, eyes heavy. "No, it's penance." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke toward them. Camila's voice softened. "If you wanted revenge, you have it. Why not stop?" Adrian's gaze returned to the desert. "Because pain doesn't end when they die. It ends when someone feels it back. And that someone is me?" "Maybe." She rose, shaky but defiant. "Then, kill me." He watched her for a long moment, then shook his head. No, you'll live with it. You'll remember the night your father's sins burned your world down. You'll understand what she felt when they took her from me. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. You're a monster. He exhaled smoke, the ember glowing briefly like a dying heartbeat. Maybe, but even monsters bleed. She hesitated. And what do you bleed for? He looked at her, truly looked, and for a second, the rage cracked just enough for her to see the grief beneath. For her tears, he said quietly. Every single one. They drove in silence until dawn. The desert stretched endless and red, the sun rising over the ruins of what had been. When Camila finally spoke, her voice was hoarse but steady. Where will you go? Adrian's hand tightened on the steering wheel. Where the next house needs to burn. She turned to him, studying his profile. The man who'd saved her, the man who'd destroyed everything she'd known. And me? You'll stay alive, because you command it? Because she would have wanted it. They didn't speak again. As the light broke fully across the desert, Adrian Vega drove toward the horizon. The ashes of his vengeance behind him and a woman beside him who was both witness and wound. The fire had ended. But the war inside him had just begun, and in his silence, Camila realized what truly haunted him. Not the house he burned, nor the men he killed. But the one thing he could never destroy. The sound of his wife's last cry, echoing inside his chest. For every tear you shed, he had whispered to the flames. And now, with the sun bleeding into the desert sky, he whispered it again, not to the dead this time, but to the living woman beside him. For every tear you shed, I'll make the world burn twice. The wind carried the promise away. Hot and merciless. And the Lion of the North kept driving, chasing the only redemption left to him, the one that always ended in smoke. The desert between El Paso and Juarez looked different in daylight. By morning, the horizon was white with heat, the sky washed clean of mercy. The highway shimmered under the sun like a blade, and the wind carried dust, the kind that gets into everything, the lungs, the blood, the heart. Adrian Vega drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting against his knee, veins tight beneath tanned skin. The woman beside him hadn't spoken since dawn. Camila Serrano stared straight ahead, the reflection of the desert burning in her eyes. It had been less than 12 hours since he'd pulled her from the fire, from her father's house, from the same inferno he had started, but the world already felt centuries older. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was raw. You really think this makes her rest easier? He didn't answer. She's gone, Adrian. You burned a house, not a memory. His jaw tightened. Some memories deserve to burn. Camila's lips parted, a half laugh, half sob. And what about the ones that don't? He looked at her then, eyes unreadable beneath the shadow of his lashes. You'll learn to bury those. They stopped at a gas station on the outskirts of Las Cruces, a place that smelled of oil and loneliness. Camila stepped out, stretching her legs, the heat already biting at her skin. Adrian leaned against the car, lighting a cigarette. You shouldn't smoke, she said. He smirked faintly. You shouldn't talk to men who burn your house down. She glared. Then why did you save me? He flicked ash onto the dirt. Because you screamed like her, your wife. He nodded, his gaze lost somewhere beyond the horizon. Elena, she didn't deserve what happened to her. No one does. Camila folded her arms. So now you're what, Justice? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw it, the exhaustion behind the rage. No, I'm the consequence. They drove again, the road endless, the heat shimmering around them. Camila pressed her forehead against the glass. Where are we going? Adrian's voice was low. To finish what I started, which is... He glanced at her. The Serrano family was part of something larger. Your father didn't just cross me. He sold information, locations of safe houses, routes, names. Because of him, 20 of my men are dead. Elena is dead. Camila's breath caught. He told me it was business. He nodded slowly. Business is always personal. She turned to him, anger breaking through her grief. You think that excuses what you did? He met her gaze, unflinching. Nothing excuses it, but everything explains it. She hated that part of her understood. By dusk, they reached the Rio Grande. The river looked harmless, the water low, glinting gold under the dying sun. Adrian parked the car by the bridge, stepped out, and leaned against the rail. Camila joined him, the evening wind cooling her sweat. He spoke first. When she died, I stopped believing in God. She studied him. And now? He exhaled. Now I just try to make him remember her name. Camila's voice was almost a whisper. And you think revenge does that? His eyes softened, but his words didn't. It's all I have left. The sun dipped lower. The light turned blood red. I can't go back, she said quietly. My family is gone. The business, the house, everything. Then don't. She frowned. What? He turned to face her fully. Start somewhere new. Take what's left and disappear. Her voice cracked. You really think it's that simple? He smiled without warmth. Nothing about this world is simple. But sometimes survival is the only revenge that matters. She stared at him. And what about you? I've made my choice, he said. I live for the fire. I die by it. That night they crossed into Juarez. The streets glowed with the kind of neon that hides bloodstains too easily. Music thumped in the distance, a heartbeat for a city that refused to sleep. Adrian's men were waiting at a warehouse near the edge of town. They greeted him with the reverence reserved for someone both feared and followed. Camila felt their eyes on her, curious, suspicious. She didn't belong here, and they all knew it. Inside, the air was thick with sweat, smoke, and strategy. Maps covered the tables. Weapons lined the walls. Adrian studied the room like a general surveying a battlefield. A man approached, older, scarred, loyal. We found something, Hefe. A name. Adrian looked up. Whose? Your wife's last contact. Someone she called the night before she died. The man handed him a phone, cracked, scorched, but not beyond repair. Adrian scrolled through the contacts. One number. No name. Camila watched his expression shift from steel to something she couldn't name. Who is it? She asked, but he hesitated, then said, Someone who worked for your father. She went pale. You think he had her killed? I think he wasn't working alone. Her voice trembled. Then who? Adrian looked up from the phone, his eyes burning like the fires he left behind. That's what I'm going to find out. Later, as the city slept uneasily, Camila wandered the balcony of the warehouse. Below, Adrian stood alone, looking out at Juarez's endless lights. She thought about his words, about vengeance, about penance, about the quiet between the two. He was both the weapon and the wound, and she was caught somewhere between wanting to hate him and needing to understand him. When she finally spoke, her voice carried through the night. What happens if you find the person who ordered it? Adrian didn't look back. Then I make them understand what a tear costs. And if it was someone you can't kill? He turned, meeting her gaze with a sadness too sharp to hide. Then I burn everything they love until they beg me to. The city lights flickered across his face, half shadow, half salvation. And Camila realized something that terrified her more than the fire ever had. He wasn't the devil she'd imagined. He was something far more dangerous, a man who believed the flames were mercy. The rain came back to Juarez just before dawn, heavy and unexpected, washing the dust from the streets but not the blood that lived beneath it. The storm seemed to follow Adrian Vega, the way sorrow follows the faithful, relentless, unseen, absolute dot inside the warehouse. Thunder rumbled like a heartbeat trapped under the floor. Adrian stood at the table, both hands braced on the edge, staring down at a stack of documents laid out before him. Names, numbers, faces, all roads that once led to his wife's death, and all. Somehow, circling back to one man, Javier Serrano, Camila's father, the man whose house Adrian had burned to ash dot behind him. Camila stood in silence. Her hair was still damp from the rain, her clothes borrowed. One of his men had given her a jacket too large for her frame. The sleeves swallowed her wrists, and yet she looked unshaken. Composed. She broke the quiet first. You keep staring at his name like it's going to change. Adrian didn't look up. Names never change. Only what they mean. And what does his mean now? He exhaled slowly. A debt I haven't finished paying. She stepped closer. What else did you find? He slid a photograph toward her. A man in a gray suit, salt and pepper hair, expensive watch. The kind of man who never touched the dirt but always owned it. Gabriel Montoya, Adrian said. Your father's partner. He ran the logistics for the trade routes through El Paso. When Vargas fell, Montoya switched sides. Started feeding intel to my enemies. Elena was killed 3 days later. Camila's fingers tightened on the edge of the photo. You think my father helped him? I think your father tried to stop him. Her head snapped up. What? Adrian finally looked at her. His eyes, dark, slow burning, softened with something like pity. Montoya wanted to expand. Your father didn't. He tried to cut ties quietly, but by then it was too late. Montoya needed to make an example of loyalty. Her voice broke. So he killed your wife. He nodded once, and left her body in the car she used to pick up medicine for his own daughter's heart condition. Camila went pale. That's... She stopped, unable to finish. Adrian straightened, running a hand through his hair. The scar on his temple caught the light like a mark carved by grief itself. The world runs on irony, Princessa. You'll learn that. Don't call me that, she said sharply. He almost smiled. Then stop looking at me like I'm supposed to save you. Her eyes flared. I don't want saving. Good, he said. Then we understand each other. Later that morning, the warehouse buzzed with preparation. Weapons checked, vehicles fueled, orders whispered. Adrian's empire was awake again. Stretching its muscles after months of stillness, Camila watched from the mezzanine, the city sprawling beyond the windows like a fever dream. Below, Adrian moved among his men, commanding without raising his voice. They obeyed him the way soldiers obey storms, not because they understand them, but because they know they can't survive defying them. When the briefing ended, he climbed the stairs to her, his presence filling the space even before he spoke. You shouldn't be here, he said. You keep saying that. Because it's true. She leaned on the railing, meeting his gaze. What are you planning? Montoya has a compound outside Chihuahua, he said, hidden under an old vineyard. I'll go tonight. Alone? I have men. That's not what I asked. He hesitated. Then, yes, alone. She frowned. Why? He stepped closer, his scent carrying the faint trace of smoke and rain. Because vengeance doesn't work with an audience. You call it vengeance. What would you call it? Her voice softened. Obsession. He looked at her for a long time, and something inside him shifted. Maybe there's no difference anymore. That night, lightning clawed at the horizon again, and the vineyard lay quiet under the storm. The rows of dead vines looked like bones beneath the flashes of light. Adrian moved through them, gun steady, every step a prayer wrapped in violence. He found Montoya in the cellar, drinking wine like a man toasting his own sins. Vega, Montoya said, smiling thinly. I was wondering when the fire would find me. Adrian's voice was calm. You sent men to my home. You sent them to hers. Montoya swirled the wine in his glass. She was collateral. You know how this works. Adrian's eyes flicked toward the corner. Photographs on the wall, a little girl in each frame, no older than 8. Her heart condition had made her fragile, almost translucent. Adrian leveled the gun. And what happens when your collateral grows up and learns what you did? Montoya's smile faltered. You wouldn't. I would. A voice behind him stopped him cold. Adrian. Camila, she stepped into the light, soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her face. Her eyes, sharp, steady, locked on his. You said you'd do this alone. I changed my mind. She looked past him to Montoya, then back. You kill him, and it never ends. You'll keep finding someone else to blame. He deserves it. So did my father, right? He flinched. Her voice softened. If you kill him, you'll prove every story they tell about you. And if I don't, then you'll finally be free. He hesitated, the gun trembling, his finger still on the trigger. Montoya laughed weakly. She's right, Vega. You're not a lion anymore. You're a dog that lost its bite. Adrian turned and shot the wall beside Montoya's head. The bullet cracked the wine bottle, splattering red across the man's face like blood. He stepped closer, voice low, dangerous. You think this is mercy? It's worse. You'll wake up every day knowing I let you live. Montoya was shaking now. Adrian lowered the gun, turned to Camila. Let's go. They drove through the storm in silence. Thunder rolled above them like the growl of something ancient. Finally, Camila spoke. Why did you stop? He gripped the wheel tighter. Because for the first time I wanted to see what forgiveness feels like. And he exhaled. It hurts worse than revenge. She smiled sadly. Maybe that's the point. He glanced at her, the woman whose life he destroyed and then saved, whose presence had turned his vengeance into something he no longer recognized. Camila, he said quietly, when this is over, walk away. Don't become like me. She looked out at the rain-blurred road. I already did, Adrian. The moment you spared him. Outside, the desert bloomed with lightning white fire across black sky. And for the first time in years, the Lion of the North didn't feel the fire inside him growing. He felt it fade, but he also knew. Every ember leaves its mark. The road back to Juarez was quiet that night. The kind of quiet that comes after something has been broken, but not yet mourned. The storm had passed, leaving a low mist across the desert. The world smelled of wet earth and gasoline, and the horizon pulsed with the faint glow of a city that didn't know it was waiting for fire. Adrian. Viga drove without speaking. Camila sat beside him, her eyes on the dark ribbon of highway, her thoughts tangled somewhere between guilt and disbelief. Montoya was still alive. Adrian had let him live. And for reasons she couldn't understand, that mercy scared her more than his violence ever had. Do you regret it? She asked finally. Adrian didn't look at her. I don't know yet. You could have ended it tonight. He exhaled through his nose. There's no end, Camila. There never is. Then what was the point? He glanced at her, eyes dark under the faint glow of the dashboard. To see if I still could. She turned toward him. Could what? Choose. The word hung between them like smoke. They reached the safe house at the edge of Juarez just before dawn. A small compound surrounded by concrete walls and silence. Adrian's men met them at the gate, their faces drawn, their movements sharp. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and tension. The warehouse lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the floor. Vega walked straight to the back office, peeled off his wet jacket, and poured himself a drink without offering one to anyone else. Camila followed, closing the door behind her. You look tired, she said softly. He gave a dry laugh. I've looked tired for years. You did the right thing. He raised the glass to his lips. That's not what it feels like. It never does. He turned toward her then, and something inside him cracked, the armor, the command. The legend of El Leon del Norte. All of it seemed to flicker in the low light, replaced by a man who suddenly looked very human. I killed 100 men and felt nothing, he said quietly. But walking away from one makes me feel like I'm falling apart. She stepped closer. Because it means you're still alive. He looked down at his drink, then set it aside. You shouldn't have followed me to the vineyard. If I hadn't, you'd be dead. Maybe that's what should have happened. Camila's voice hardened. Don't you dare say that. He looked up. You think I deserve peace? She met his gaze. I think you deserve to stop bleeding. For a long time they stood in silence. The storm outside replaced by the hum of the city waking up. Adrian leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. You're leaving in the morning. I've arranged a car to take you across the border. New name, new life. Her stomach dropped. You're sending me away? You'll be safer that way. And what about you? He shrugged. Men like me don't get to start over. You keep saying that, she snapped. As if dying for what you've done will balance the scales. He looked at her, and the sadness in his eyes made her throat tighten. It's not about balance. It's about ending the noise. Her breath caught. You mean you're going after Montoya again? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Adrian, no. He straightened, his voice calm. He'll come for me. He'll come for everyone I care about. I'm giving him the chance to finish what he started. But this time he'll have to look me in the eyes when he fails. Then let me stay. He shook his head. You'd only die in my shadow. She stepped closer, trembling. Maybe that's where I belong. Something in his expression broke, a flicker of fear or maybe longing. Camila. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the slow, heavy rhythm of his heart. "You burned my world to ash," she whispered. "You took everything. But I can't hate you anymore. I don't even know if I want to." He caught her wrist gently, his voice almost pleading. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because I don't know if I can stop myself from believing it." Her breath hitched. "Then don't." He froze, every scar, every breath, every ounce of control he built collapsing in the space between them. And then he kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't tender. It was the collision of two broken worlds trying to survive each other. The taste of smoke and salt. The heat of everything they hadn't said. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered against his lips, "What now?" Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. "Now I finish this." At noon, she found him outside the compound, loading his gun into a black SUV. The sun was merciless, baking the concrete, bleaching the world of color. "You're really going," she said. He didn't look at her. "You shouldn't be here." "You keep saying that," she muttered. "And yet here I am." He closed the trunk, turned to face her. The light made the scar on his temple glow pale against his skin. "You have to let me go, Camila." "Why?" "So you can die and call it redemption?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Because if I stay, you'll become like me." She shook her head, tears gathering. "Maybe I already have." He stepped closer, rushing a thumb under her eye to catch one before it fell. "Don't let them see you cry," he murmured. "Why?" "Because I've already burned too many houses for your tears." The words tore through her like a blade. He leaned in, kissed her once more, softer this time, almost reverent. "For what it's worth," he whispered, "you made me remember what it feels like to live before I die." Then he turned, climbed into the car, and drove away. She watched until the dust swallowed him, and for the first time since the night her father's house burned, she cried without fear. That evening, word reached her, a shootout on the highway to Chihuahua. 3 vehicles destroyed. A dozen men dead. No body recovered. Some said Adrian Vega died in the fire. Others said he disappeared into it. But as Camila stood on the balcony, the wind carrying the smell of smoke from somewhere far away, she closed her eyes and whispered into the night, "For every tear I shed, you burned the world." And for the first time, she didn't feel the weight of the words. Only the strange, trembling lightness of a woman who finally understood that the fire had never been his curse alone. It had always been hers too. The desert didn't hold on to its ghosts for long. By the time the smoke cleared over the Chihuahua highway, the wind had already begun its work, sweeping away the ash, burying the bullet casings, erasing the tracks of the dead. But some ghosts refused to stay buried. 3 weeks after the shootout, Camila Serrano stood on the balcony of a small apartment in Santa Fe, the morning light spilling across her bare feet. The mountains were quiet here, painted gold by sunrise. The air smelled of sage and rain, and for the first time in months, no one was watching her. She had taken the name Elena Vega at the border, a cruel irony she couldn't resist. The papers were forged. The money came from accounts she didn't ask too many questions about. She told herself she wasn't hiding. She was surviving. Every night she dreamed of fire. Every morning she woke reaching for a man who wasn't there. And every day, she told herself the same thing. He's gone. The locals knew her as the quiet woman who ran the flower stall at the edge of the market. She sold desert roses, lily, and sometimes lavender when she could find it. She never smiled long enough for questions. But on a Tuesday, when the rain rolled in from the mountains and the market thinned, a stranger stopped in front of her stall. He wore a dark coat, his collar turned up against the drizzle. The years, or the war, had taken something from him. A limp, a shadow, maybe both. He didn't speak at first. Just looked down at the flowers, fingers brushing one of the roses. She felt her throat tighten before her mind caught up to the truth. "Adrian." He looked up, eyes dark and impossibly alive. "Camila." The sound of her name and his voice undid her. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispered. He smiled faintly, rain catching in the lines of his face. "I was, for a while." Why are you here?" He studied her, his voice softer now. "To see if you still hate me." Her breath trembled. "You think I can still afford to?" He tilted his head, something like a smirk flickering at the corner of his mouth. "Hate's cheaper than forgiveness." You shouldn't have come, she said, though her body had already betrayed her, every nerve pulling toward him like gravity. If they find out you're alive, they won't, he interrupted. The world believes the lion burned with his enemies. Let it. The market was nearly empty now, the rain falling harder. She turned away, pretending to rearrange the flowers. You came back just to torment me? She asked. I came back, he said quietly, because I remembered something you said. She glanced at him. What? You told me you couldn't hate me anymore. I wanted to see if you meant it. She swallowed hard. I did. I do. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the scent of rain and smoke clinging to him. Then why are you shaking? Because I don't know what's worse, she whispered, wanting to see you or wishing I never had. His eyes softened. Maybe it's both. They found shelter in the back of her small apartment above the market. The lights flickered, the thunder rolled, and the air between them carried the same tension as that night in Juarez, the night they'd kissed between fire and ruin. Camila poured coffee with trembling hands. You shouldn't have survived. Neither should you, he said. She sat opposite him, the steam rising between them like the ghost of everything they'd never said. You really let them think you were dead? It's easier to kill a legend than a man, he said. Let the name die. I've been trying to figure out what's left. And what did you find? He looked at her for a long moment. You. Her breath caught. Don't what? Don't make this another story you ruin. He smiled sadly. I'm trying not to. Then why are you here? Because I couldn't burn the world twice, he said quietly. And you were the only thing left worth saving. Her eyes glistened. You can't keep saving me, Adrian. You're not God. He leaned back, gaze steady. No, but I've met him. He looks a lot like you when you're angry. She laughed once, sharp and wet with tears. You haven't changed. Yes, he said. I have. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box, old, battered, charred at the edges. Your father's last piece of her. Elena's. She frowned. Elena? My wife, he said softly. She had something of yours. Something she meant to return. He opened the box. Inside, wrapped in black ribbon, was a silver locket. Camila touched it carefully, her fingers trembling. This was my mother's. She gave it to Elena, he said. Said it was meant for her daughter, for when she finally found her way back to the light. Camila looked up slowly, realization dawning. They knew each other? Adrian nodded. Before the war. Before the business. Before all of it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She was trying to save her too. She did, he said. In a way. She saved me. Camila stared at the locket, her heart breaking open all over again. And now you're here. He smiled faintly. Now I'm here. She closed the box gently, holding it to her chest. What do you want, Adrian? He hesitated, the rain outside slowing to a whisper. Peace. You think you'll find it with me? He took a step closer. No, but I think you're the only one who can show me what it looks like. She looked at him for a long time, the silence stretching between heartbeats. Then she said, barely audible, Stay. He froze. You'll regret it, he said. Probably, she whispered. But I'm tired of running from ghosts. Let this one stay. He reached out, fingers brushing her face, tracing the tear that had escaped. For every tear you shed, he said softly, I burned the world. Maybe now I can start planting something in the ashes. And she kissed him slow, aching, honest. Weeks passed. The storms faded. In the market, people began to whisper about the quiet man who helped the flower woman carry crates in the morning and disappeared by dusk. They didn't know his name. They didn't ask Dot, and she didn't tell them Dot at night. They would sit by the window watching lightning roll across the desert sky, their hands brushing but never holding too tightly. Both knew peace was temporary. Both had learned to love it anyway. Sometimes, in the still hours before dawn, Camila would wake to find him watching her. His eyes soft, the fire in them no longer rage, but something gentler. Dot, and she'd whisper into the dark. Not for him to hear, but for the ghosts outside the door, for every tear I shed. He built a life instead. The desert wind would answer, rustling the flowers drying on the sill. Dot, and somewhere out beyond the horizon, The Lion of the North slept at last, not in a grave, but in the fragile, fleeting peace of a man who had finally stopped burning.